Thanks everybody for joining. Excited to have the opportunity to talk to you about Roku Voice today. I wanted to get started and first introduce the panel and talk about what we're going to discuss today. So very briefly, we'll introduce you to the team, talk about how Roku Voice works to hopefully give you a broad overview of what our system does and how it works with the OS more broadly. And then we're going to discuss what we've added with Roku OS 10.5 and hopefully take some questions. As a reminder, if you scan this link, this will take you to Slido where you can submit questions for us, and we'll take those at the end of the session. So first and foremost, wanted to introduce the team. We'll be joined today by Joel, who's a developer engineer, Soren, who leads the voice team, Shane, one of the firmware engineers who's worked quite a lot on the keyboards. You might have seen his session yesterday. I'm the product guy that looks after voice, and our moderator, John, who just introduced us. So to start out, wanted to talk about voice. Generally, why should you care about voice? And I spoke a little bit about this at the keynote. First and foremost, voice is another way for your customer to reach you. And I think this is important because for most of what you do, you're going to be making software on Roku that will draw boxes and menus on the screen. That's part of the platform that we provide. And people are going to use the remote to navigate your menu, to tell you what they want. You know, we're really providing a way to connect you with your customer, right? We try to get out of the way. Your customer wants to see the content that you provide. Voice is the other major way that your customer can interact with you. Rather than use the D-pad to get around, it provides a way for them to tell you exactly what they want. And so there are a few cases where I think we really shine. One of them is when the customer's not browsing per se, and they really know exactly what they want. It would be too cumbersome or too slow to get there with the remote. Some good examples of places where we really add a lot of value. Helping sign into an application. We'll provide some examples of that, enhancements that we've made to the platform for voice keyboards, being able to skip around in a film. So being able to fast forward half an hour if you want to skip a section of a favorite movie, or start over if maybe you're watching an episode and fell asleep in the middle of it. And then we also provide this hands-free experience that we've announced with our new remote, where you can say something like, "Hey Roku, where's my remote?" Wake it up and it'll chime to you if it's in the sofa or under the pillow or something like that. So I'm now going to pass it over to Soren, who's going to walk you through how Roku Voice works.
Hi everybody. Thanks for joining today. Yeah, so first a little bit of the fundamentals of what is the actual things that happens underneath the cover when you are speaking into a voice remote. So the voice remotes themselves takes audio, and it basically sends that forward to the Roku device in front of you. And the Roku device will then make a connection up to our cloud services where we have the Roku Voice service. And it will stream the audio that you are speaking in real time up to that cloud service. And we'll do what you're seeing up in number 2, this speech recognition, where we basically are taking that audio that is spoken by the user, and we are streaming that directly into a speech recognition system that returns us text. And so when you're releasing the button, we basically have a text transcription of what you've done. But that's only part of it, right? Just because you have a text transcription that says "fine westerns with Clint Eastwood" or something like that, doesn't mean you have understood what actually is being asked by the user. So we're sending that text over into what's called a natural language understanding system. It's largely a machine learned system that is looking at the text transcription, and it tried to understand what that text means just like a human would do. And then basically take that and in a structured format, send that back to us so that we can do something with it. So in the normal case where you're doing like a search, that will go to the Roku search, and you will send a query there, and a query results comes back, and we will basically send that back to the device, and it will be displayed on the Roku so you can select from the content that you have searched for. In the case of like westerns, hopefully there will be some Clint Eastwood movies in there. So now, how does that apply to you and your app? The things that we can't actually handle ourselves. I mean, we can handle a lot of the things like all the search results, as I said, like, but there's a lot of edge cases that we cannot handle, that we need the channel developer to help out with actually handling. And that is things like when you're pausing and playing, stuff like that. You're usually just like when you're using a voice remote, a regular remote, you are the one that is acting on the play and the pause into a large extent, and all the button clicks. So when the user say play or pause or fast forward half an hour, I mean, fast forward half an hour is an interesting thing because you have to basically decide how to execute that within your application. We are sending that over with what you probably already know called an input called RO input event. Where we will send, oops, hi.
Sorry.
You lost it in the dog.
Switch that back. Sorry.
Thank you. So those more complicated commands we will basically send to you for you to execute, and that's so that we can give you a good user experience inside your app. So again, what we will do, we will basically interpret the audio, but we will hand off the command to you. So how does that look like? So if you go to the next slide. So very similar. Some subtle differences here is that basically we take, again, the audio and we take it up to the voice service that does the transcription and does a natural language understanding. But when we have basically understood that the command is not for search result, it's not for like find westerns with Clint Eastwood or find the Mindy project or something like that. It is literally something that the user expects the channel to handle. For instance, like fast forward 10 minutes. We take that structured intent and send back to the Roku operating system that runs in the box. And then the Roku operating system will then look at your channel, look at the manifest, your capabilities, and so on and so forth, and forward it to you as an RO input so that you can action it. And at that time, we then need to get a confirmation back on that you have handled it in one way or another. Either that you have done what the user said, or that you maybe are at a point where you cannot do what the user is asking for. So a typical example is like if somebody is asking for fast forward 10 minutes, but you are actually in a grid where you are trying to play something, there is nothing to fast forward. So it's perfectly valid to basically say that that's not a possible option at this point in time. Okay, next.
All right, so now I think I will take you through what's new with Roku OS 10.5. Apologies for the goof up with the slides. My dog started barking. All right, so I want to take you through a few of the things that we've added. There are a number that I think are pretty important. The four that we are going to discuss today are the additional voice controls that we've added that are going to draw upon the things that Soren just presented. Additional support that we've added for hands-free. The changes we've made to keyboards, specifically to add voice support for email entry and passwords, and additional language support. So I'm going to start out by talking about the additional voice controls that we've added. Today we have voice controls that we've discussed, and I gave a few of these examples earlier, like being able to skip 5 minutes in a video or start over. We're adding support for 6 more commands, and we think these will be very helpful. We're adding what am I watching, the ability to skip an intro, I like this video, I don't like this video, and then really more for music than anything else, but the ability to shuffle and loop. We're asking that developers implement these in the same way that they have the other voice controls, where if they're not supported, they return error generic, so that we provide feedback to our shared customer. We've also made a number of improvements to hands-free support. So as a reminder, we launched this device in the spring. It's called the Roku Voice Remote Pro. It has a number of improvements, rechargeable battery, the lost remote finder, private listening and shortcut buttons. But the one that I wanted to talk to you about was the hands-free support. So by saying, hey Roku, you can wake this device up and issue it commands. So if you said something like, hey Roku, open the Roku channel, or hey Roku, what time is it? You'd get what you wanted. But for a lot of our partners, we found that they have profiles. And if they're trying to play their favorite show, they might get stuck on a profile screen. So we've added support for profile selection, where when the channel opens, you can say the name of your profile, and if we hear it, we'll pass it back to the channel. So let's look at a quick video of this.
Sarah, Wayne, third, the sixth one.
So that's using the sample application. Looks like I was playing twice. So how this works is at launch, you will hand us a list of the strings that you want us to listen for. And if we hear those, we will hand those back to you. So at time of application open, you would register, Chris and Soren and Joel and Shane. And when you display those on screen, if Roku Voice hears Soren, it would hand that back to your application. You could pick that profile. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about keyboards. Shane, did you want to discuss this?
Yeah, Chris. So we introduced new keyboards that are voice enabled in 10.5 that are essentially very easy to add a voice enabled functionality to your channel to dictate user searches for movies or emails, and as well as like passwords and pins. So you can see that we provide hints that drop down over the keyboard so that it fits in the same exact area of the original keyboard. So a lot of times, all you have to do is change keyboard to the object to dynamic keyboard, and it'll be voice enabled. And the same goes for like a mini keyboard that takes the left-hand side of the screen. Changing the word to dynamic in front of it will make it voice enabled. And on top of this, localization is supported by default. So it's all handled on the Roku operating system. And if a certain area is not supported, a normal text box will be shown instead without hint UI. And additionally, you can supply a custom JSON format file if need be to make a customized keyboard experience. I'd really encourage everybody to check out the keyboard workshop we did yesterday for more in depth on all the various ways we can use voice and custom keyboards in channels now.
I'll share a quick video of this.
asterisk, big G, comma, underscore, exclamation point, backslash, hyphen, P, at, S, dollar sign.
All right, now I'll talk a few minutes about language support. So as Roku has expanded internationally, we want to make sure we provide a great voice experience for our partners. Last year, we launched Spanish in the US, and we also launched it in Mexico and then extended that support across Latin America. So as a development partner, no extra work is needed for you to support these languages. We're going to pass you the intents via RO input or pass in deep links from search, same as we would for English. So there's really no work needed from you. And I'm happy to announce that with our launch of Germany, we're going to be supporting German voice from day one. We have additional languages planned for 22 and 23, and you should expect to see those soon. All right. And then I think the last bit here was if you have questions, you can click this and we'll be ready to take those questions in Slido.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the Slido. So let's take a look, see what questions we've got here. Give me 1 second. Let me share the screen. And we present this in full screen. All right, here we go. So Marcelo wants to ask, most voice-activated platforms like Amazon Echo had issues with privacy and have implemented a way for the user to review what is being recorded and stored. Will Roku provide a similar approach?
I can take that. So we have settings today where you can turn off certain types of sharing. And additionally, with the keyboards that we have that take your email or your password, we don't retain any of that. It's dropped on the floor immediately. It's not logged. So I guess the short answer to that is yes. I think we're more conservative than the industry and how we treat your data, and that's in place today.
Excellent. All right. Here's a question that I believe has come up in the developer Slack channel recently. What is the best method to have multiple voice edit boxes or multiple voice text edit boxes on a single screen? I want to enter account setup details by voice without showing the keyboard.
So the short answer is that we made a decision very early on that multiple voice text box on one screen is a very confusing experience. We want the user to be able to press the mic button and wherever the focus lies, put the input into one box. However, there has been some channels have developed a way where when they grab the focus of the text box and only enable voice when the text box is focused, and when the text box loses focus, they disable the voice on the text box. And with that, you can make a row of 4 or 5 different text boxes that are only one is voice enabled at a time. And as the focus changes, the voice text box, the voice is disabled on each text box as it loses focus. But I would encourage any developer just to use separate screens because I think it's a lot clearer.
Excellent. All right, this is Chris has got a great question. Are the new commands such as skip intro and such to be planned to be optional? These are the new optional voice controls that are now called additional enhanced voice controls, such as now playing, skip intro, shuffle, loop. So not all channels will or even can't support this due to lack of video metadata information available to them.
Yeah, so they absolutely are optional, but what we are asking is that you acknowledge the command and let us know if you can handle it or not. And I want to explain this in the context of CERT generally and what we're asking to do. When you give a voice command and we hand it in via RO input, we start a timer on our side, and it's 5 seconds. If you don't do anything with it, eventually we will bonk and say and give a message to the user, which is a pretty disruptive experience. So last year we rolled out a CERT requirement where we said, please do something with these. If you can't handle them, please let us know so that we don't bonk on top, right? That you acknowledged it somehow with the user and you gave them some feedback. It's not as serious with push to talk. It's a mild annoyance, but with hands-free, it's a real problem. So if you have a hands-free remote and you said something like, hey, Roku, skip intro, and your channel does not support it, the user, if we don't provide any feedback, doesn't actually know if the remote heard them or didn't hear them. It could be a very confusing state. So what we'd like to ask is that you say, yeah, I heard you. I don't do that, right? And you can say not supported. And the general philosophy is not leaving the user hanging. And so they get this obnoxious bonk after 5 seconds. That's really all we're trying to do with that CERT, is just provide good, consistent feedback to the user.
Right. So I think the essence is that if you receive a command that's not applicable to your channel's content, then either you need to handle it with error.generic or unhandled. So that is the essence of saying it's optional. I mean, either you implement it, or if you don't implement it, then at least report back with error.generic or unhandled.
Yeah, a word on that. We have traditionally asked that you hand back unhandled if it's something that you don't know what to do with. But if you know you don't handle it, tell us by saying error generic. That will give us the opportunity to say, yeah, this is not something the OS should try and handle in a different way, or display a message on. You're like, yep, I know exactly what skip intro is. We don't support skip intro. We just tell the user, don't try skip intro in our application. It will not work.
And the reason why we have both of these is to kind of indicate a channel error, as in the channel knows it cannot handle it. It recognizes the command. We cannot skip an intro, so we do not. And an unhandled, then that's when you return error.generic. Returning unhandled means I don't understand this. Maybe some other handler somewhere can pick it up and handle it, but it might not be perfect. So it's a I don't understand versus I understand this. It's an error. Is the difference between unhandled and error.generic.
Good. All right. Let us move on to the next question. From Brian, we have found that voice keyboards keep voice control even when they are not displayed or when they lose focus, such that other voice controls are consumed by the voice keyboard. Are there plans to change that behavior?
So the voice keyboard, the philosophy with this was that it is different from voice generally, and it supports actually a different model. So if in general you're trying to dictate character by character to our usual voice stack, it's not going to be understood, and that's deliberate. When a voice keyboard's on screen, you've got a very special model that's handling these commands. That's by design. So I hope that makes sense, and that is working well for you, but that isn't accidental. It's meant, we have a different UI that we present, and it's meant to be in a very different mode.
Okay. We've got a couple questions that we seeded. Go down here. Do you have any sample applications demonstrating how a voice-enabled profile selection screen works?
Yeah, well, so we've updated the GitHub. If you go to GitHub/Roku Dev, we have a transport control demo, and we've updated one of them, the transport control custom UI with the voice control, new voice controls, and also the now playing function.
Perfect.
And that video that we shared was actually Joel's sample code. So you can see it. It provides a couple things that I want to call out. One of them is the ability to select by name. And I think you saw that very clearly. So if this was the set of profiles, I could say Shane, I could say Soren, I could say Joel, I could say John. The second thing is it lets you pick by their position, right? So you can say something like the second one. And I'm sure everybody's Zoom screen is different, but in my case, the second one would be Chris, right? And so you could either say Chris or you could say the second one. And the general idea, we've built this as a somewhat generic capability. And we're trying to allow you a couple different ways to pick something in a list.
Great.
And just a comment on the profile selector is that you don't, when you're listening for a voice command for the profiles, you don't just want to listen to that. You also want to be listening for any deep linking type of commands that come in via RO input at the same time, because probably you would fail certification if you were to, if someone was to test deep linking and you got your voice profile selector up. So, and it didn't work. So you need to make sure you're listening for both in that state.
And I think the sample application shows that it's basically a big if then else case statement.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, let's see. Stephen asking, why do we require developers to respond to unhandled commands instead of providing a list of handled commands and defaulting to unhandled for any unregistered?
But I think that's what we do, right? So we provide a list of all the commands that we could send in. If you don't respond, that's when we take action, right? We know that we handed something into you. And that's the thing that I'm trying to avoid, was that bonk after 5 seconds where we said, look, this should have been plenty of time for our partner to decide what to do with this. And if they didn't do anything, we have to provide feedback to the user. And so I hope that makes sense. The unhandled is you acknowledging, I don't know what this is. Whereas Shane's code will then go try and do something with it.
I think the question might be slightly different in terms of like, why don't we just have a manifest entry or something like that that says these are all the commands I handles? And I think the answer to that is that it sets you up for failure in terms of like that if you're doing a typo in that and it's not getting validated and we don't know, then it just becomes so much more difficult for you to actually develop your application. You'll end up trashing in terms of like figuring out why the command is not arriving to your channel, where that the way that the sample app is written, is basically you get all of them and you basically just have the equivalent of a case statement where that at the bottom of it, you just say else unhandled or error generic, and you're basically just throwing it back to us. And so it's effectively the same. It's a question of just style and structure. And I think that my opinion is that it becomes easier for you to make sure that you are getting all the kind of things that you want and need to actually action.
And currently the sample app only throws error generic for what we consider out of context. Like, so, since we don't have any springboards in the app, when you say play and you're on the main screen, I just chose that time to throw the error generic. But you typically want to do that. Let's say you're on a menu item where you obviously there's nothing to play. That would kind of be the context where error generic is one way of looking at it is, and there's others, but is for when a command is not textually there, or you don't handle that in that case.
Excellent. That was great insight. So let's move on to, these are the last few questions. These are ones that we've kind of seeded in here. This goes back to the additional enhanced voice controls. So I don't have content in a playlist. Do I need to implement the new shuffle and loop voice commands? So exactly, if I don't have content in a playlist and someone hands me a shuffle, or if my app receives a shuffle or a loop, what do I do?
You basically just say it's not applicable to your application. So
and how do I do that?
You return a error dot generic as a message.
Yep. And the idea there is let us know so we can let the user know, right? Like you say, yeah, I don't do that. You're on some settings menu inside your app and somebody says fast forward. That makes no sense. We can just say, yeah, you can't fast forward here. It's a settings menu. And we'll paint it on screen and tell the user we don't do that here.
Excellent.
And the thing to keep in mind, imagine it's hands-free and maybe the person doesn't even have line of sight, right? Or they're doing laundry, or their kid mashed the button or whatever. These are the cases we're trying to support.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. We're down to the last two questions. So when these two are gone, we'll wrap up. So if you guys have more questions, please enter them in Slido. Okay. Once again, related to error handling. What are we doing to make error handling easier?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. I think the advice we'd give is catch the ones you can, and if not, return something as the end of this if then else chain.
Yeah, and just to be clear with this handler, it's very forward thinking. Like, there's no setup with the OS required to give like a list of voice commands that are supported. We fire the channel at the end of that handler. They have to have a handler per cert requirement, but at the end of the handler, there's an else, and that's where everything falls through. So any voice command that is not handled, falls into that else, which throws a message on the screen that this is not supported.
It also gives you the ability to dynamically decide, depending on the application state, as to what commands you can or cannot handle. So as I think I called out earlier in the presentation, like fast forward 10 minutes, it's not applicable if you're in a settings part of your application or if you are in the grid part of selecting content, but it is applicable when you're inside playing video. So those kind of decisions is something that you can make inside your app, and you can decide depending on the state of your app as to how to handle various command and whether it's a user error or not a user error to actually issue the command.
Excellent. All right. This is Chris coming in at the gun here. Are there plans to propose components or APIs earlier than betas for components like this? When initially working with the new voice component, there were some useful changes that could have been called out sooner if the proposal was more open.
I can't speak to that, but we would love your feedback. We'd be delighted if you've got ideas about how we could do this better. We are trying to build this in a way where we make it easy to implement and don't break anybody's app, and yet also provide good functionality for users with the new devices that we have released, and make it open-ended so we can extend it and not lock anybody in. So if there's some specific thing that you didn't like, please let us know. We are very, very open to that, and we would be happy to make changes.
All right. The last question. I've heard about direct to play. Can you elaborate on this feature? What are the requirements for my content to playback directly from a voice request?
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. There are some details on the developer portal as well, but basically, if you're in search and your content is unique, and we know what it is, we'll take you straight there if you say play. So I'll give an example. If you said play Mandalorian, that'll pop you into Disney Plus, or any title that's got a unique name. If something has multiple places somebody could watch it, we tend to show search. If the user adds the channel they want to watch it on, we'll try to take them straight in if that's supported.
And this is also essentially the requirements is that you support RO input, and you're listening for pretty much the same type of deep links your channel would handle when it's being launched, but via the RO input method. So that essentially requirement is that you receive that link and as described in our docs, you play back the content that's been sent.
Excellent. So I think Chris Dwyer Perkins wanted to expand on his earlier question about new features and such. So Chris, I'm going to give you the floor here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead, Chris.
Again.
Yeah. So I think the main thing I was trying to ask or wanted to elaborate on in particular was there's some of us that are in a privileged situation where it's very easy for us to give feedback. We have partners, and we're very lucky, or partner management individuals, and we're very lucky to have them. However, at large, it's very hard to collectively as a community give that feedback. So I think that's kind of what we're at least I am advocating for, because we're able to kind of work with each other as a community along with Roku to get that feedback to a state that works for everybody, right?
Yeah, I hear you. Look, I'm sorry about that. There's my email. If the existing paths we have are not working, email me. We are sincerely very, very interested in your feedback and trying to make this work for everybody. I'm very, very much invested in making voice great on Roku. As you can imagine, I do a lot of testing with competing devices as well, and we want the best voice experience for people in market. And so if you're not getting something you need, please let me know.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I hope you are. I hope you're like, no, it's just, I want more because it's already awesome. But if not, we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we trying to be very accessible. We also have partner managers that goes out to at least some of the partners and collecting feedback. So if you are in that position that you have somebody that you're already working with, you can also channel it through there, and they will set up meetings with us if there's details or anything like that that we should work out, or any other kind of feedback in terms of like features that you're requesting. Can go through them as well.
And also partners, the partner success at Roku.com is, if you're not a partner managed directly partner, then that would be your place to send feedback.
Okay, that is great. I think that concludes this session. Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much to the Voice team for a great session.